Hello to all you movie barfs, and welcome back to the channel. When Robert Downey Jr. was asked what he was going to do after Avengers Endgame, he said, "I'm going to do little." If you thought that joke was stupid, well, you won't be laughing too hard when you hear the forced jokes in 2020's Dolittle. Dolittle was a return to its roots as a children's storybook character, as opposed to the modern approach in the Eddie Murphy movies. But Dolittle is so bad that it makes the Eddie Murphy movies look like Oscar contenders by comparison. The film was universally dumped on by critics and audiences alike, and regarded as one of the worst movies of 2020. It failed as a comedy, a children's movie, or an adventure film as mentioned by Dolittle himself. Today, we'll be looking at the recipe for disaster that is Dolittle. So get ready your sea legs, hoist your sails, and prepare your barf bags as we embark on this perilous adventure into this absolute crapfest. The movie begins with a once-upon-a-time storybook narration, in which we're quickly briefed on Dolittle's background and his unique ability to communicate with animals in their own language. He gets an estate from the Queen and uses it as a clinic for treating animals, hence becoming known as Dr. Dolittle. But all is not well as we find out that Dolittle's wife has tragically died at sea following a shipwreck. Dolittle is devastated, and he shuts himself away from the world and becomes a recluse, just like Bruce Wayne in The Dark Knight Rises. This opening narration serves to set up the character's initial state as a hermit, but it feels rushed. We're only told that Dolittle and his wife were close, but we don't actually see it like we do in Pixar's Up. The opening montage in that movie was way more effective, as we actually get to see their relationship. Even though 0 words were spoken in the entire segment, when Ellie dies, we all feel that same gut punch that Carl does. And in just a few minutes, the filmmakers succeeded in making us feel for the character. So Dolittle starts off the film being a supposed shut-in, but so much for that, as we see that he has enough animal companions in his mansion to host a party every day. When we do see him, he looks like a Viking on a bad hair day wearing a ridiculous outfit. He's playing chess with a gorilla using mice as chess pieces. Take that as your first indication of the kind of childish humor we're gonna get for the rest of the film. The gorilla starts making ape sounds and Dolittle makes the same unintelligible noises. Turns out, the filmmakers are showing us how Dolittle looks like from a third person's perspective when talking to animals, and he looks like an absolute madman here. I'd be more interested to see the backstory, where he manages to convince the public that he's actually talking to animals instead of, being thrown into a mental asylum. All the other animals like the dog and the parrot also start talking with their own languages, and Dolittle is able to answer them. But so that we, as the audience, can understand what they're saying, everyone just gets translated into English. And here we get one of the main gripes with this movie, RDJ's horrible Welsh accent. It was already hard to take the idea of a human talking to animals seriously, but this awkward accent destroys any chance of that happening. It sounds fake and pretentious, and made his dialogue harder to understand. The real question is, how did anyone on set not point this out while shooting is kinda hard to believe. This version of Dolittle was some kind of cross between his Sherlock Holmes and Jack Sparrow. He has those elaborate automated track systems that Doc Brown would have in Back to the Future for making breakfast. The film tries to make being wacky look cool, but it comes across as cliché and, not to mention, silly. Also, I get that Dolittle can speak all the animal languages, but how do the different animals talk to each other? Dogs bark and birds chirp, but somehow, they're able to understand each other perfectly fine. I mean, do birds end up barking like dogs to get their point across? I have no idea. Right from the first few scenes, we see how overcrowded this movie is. From the animals, that is. Every scene has some annoying chatter from one out of the hundreds of animals that are in this movie, and it gets old really fast. It's as if the film wanted to show as many animals talking as possible, and I find myself going, ugh, not again. And I can't decide which is worse, hearing RDJ's fake accent or more animal banter. Anyway, the inciting incident happens when Dolittle receives news from a girl from the palace, who tells him that the Queen is dying and asks for his help. After much persuasion, Dolittle decides to help, only because, if the Queen dies, he'll lose the title deed to his estate. What a kind and compassionate protagonist. So Doolittle goes off to the palace along with a girl, and a supporting boy character who snuck into Doolittle's estate earlier to save a squirrel that he shot. At the palace, we find that the queen is dying by poison, and some foul play is suspected. We get introduced to the film's main antagonists, Lord Bagley and Dr. Mudfly, and it's revealed from the start that they're the ones behind it. Gotta give the studio some credit on this one. They knew if they revealed this at the end, it would have been a cliche plot twist, so they decided that they might as well just tell us from the start. Doolittle then diagnoses that the solution is a cure that's never been tested, from a tree that's never been seen, on an island that's never been found? Okay? So they go off on a ship to sail to this non-existent island, and supporting boy character is brought along because the parrot deems Doolittle as needing more of his kind around him. Mudfly attempts to derail them, but Doolittle manages to escape with the help of some humpback whales who serve to boost his ship's speed. The CGI here in the underwater scenes is absolutely atrocious. I'm guessing that most of the budget went to RDJ's salary, and making all the animals, so they had to make do. Also, isn't it just incredibly convenient that a couple of humpback whales are just hanging around to save Doolittle? Why would they care what happens to Doolittle? Are they more inclined to help Doolittle just because he speaks their language? How can they hear him through the helmet anyway? I have no idea. At this point, we have to mention how boring and one-dimensional the animal characters are. Most notably, we have the cowardly gorilla who's always on the verge of an anxiety attack, a naggy parrot who serves as Doolittle's nanny, and a polar bear that somehow manages to survive in tropical weather. None of them have any impact on the film and just serve to fill up screen time with redundant chatter. And the jokes, my god, how they fall flat. No one above the age of 6 would find them funny. We get stuff like the squirrel saying, "He's too beautiful to die," and a dog who loves the smell of butts. Oh, and throw in some monkey burping jokes in there too. I'd say the attempt at humor only makes you feel embarrassed that this is what they came up with. Doolittle then reveals that his wife was looking for the tree too, in the voyage that took her life, and that she has a journal pointing to its location, so they have to get the journal first, which is with her father on another island. Doolittle and the supporting boy character have a heart-to-heart talk, and then they drop this bomb. The boy has now learned to speak ape. Where did that come from? That raises several questions. So animal speak can now be taught? Then Doolittle should convert his clinic into a school for animal speak. That way more people would be able to communicate with their pets and the world would be a better place for animals. But whatever, the boy is now a little Doolittle. So they get to the island where the journal is, but it's in the possession of Razuli, the father of Doolittle's wife who blames Doolittle for her death. And here on the island, we add yet another animal companion to the mix, as if it wasn't already crammed enough as it was. We get a very strange looking dragonfly with anthropomorphic eyes, and it just looks very inconsistent with the realistic look the studio gave the other animals. This dragonfly is more like an annoying Tinkerbell, always hovering around and talking nonsense. I'd say it's the worst character in the film, both in design and script, but just when you thought they couldn't go any lower, they pull this out. Doolittle then gets captured in the process and is left to be eaten alive by a tiger, who also happens to be a former patient. Here we have more lame jokes, like Doolittle distracting the tiger by shining a light and making it chase it. This scene has hardly any tension, as the tiger alternates between being ferocious to becoming manic-depressive with mummy issues. Eventually, the cowardly gorilla comes along and in slapstick fashion, low blows the tiger to defeat him. Yeah, that actually happens. A gorilla knees the groin of a tiger. And that is pretty much the summation of the gorilla's character arc in just one scene. He overcomes his fears to take down a tiger. Not that we actually cared, since the character hardly had any depth to begin with. We're more relieved that we don't get his annoying fears as an excuse for more forced jokes. And another gripe audiences have with the animal characters is how modern their speech is. They're in a time period centuries earlier, but they sound way too contemporary for their own good. We have Godfather references, and animals giving sports commentaries like in a boxing match. Doolittle then escapes with the journal, but is recaptured by Razuli, who now has a sudden change of heart after he conveniently overhears that Doolittle blames himself for his wife's death, that he should have never let her go by herself. Well, genius, of course he blames himself. What did you think, he was dancing on her grave? Nothing changed beyond what he already knew to be true, so his sudden decision to embrace Doolittle is hardly convincing. Anyway, after some time, Doolittle and his gang reach the island with Mudfly and his soldiers, and they manage to find the tree. Only thing is, it's guarded by a fire-breathing dragon. If you hadn't seen this in the trailers, this would have taken you by surprise. I mean, I knew we were in a kids movie, but I guess we're somehow in the fairy tale zone now too? The dragon does some dragon stuff, fire-breathing and killing random soldiers, and is about to kill Doolittle when he suddenly starts speaking dragon, which stops it in its tracks. Kinda reminds me of the scene in Aquaman where he manages to calm the Leviathan just by being able to speak to it. And as it turns out, the dragon is guarding the fruit of the tree, and that only someone worthy can take it. And just like in the tiger scene earlier, the dragon switches from being a ferocious creature to a granny with an emotional wound, just because Doolittle speaks her language. Doolittle then notices that the dragon has an impacted colon from the emotional stress over the years. And get this, he proceeds to give the dragon an enema. No, really, I'm not kidding. He actually goes to the dragon's ass and starts pulling out armor from its behind to relieve its colon. Now, how this happened is truly one of life's big mysteries. An actual human being wrote this into the script and everyone watched as RDJ acted it out. How did no one think this was a bad idea? What were they thinking? Then we have that gigantic extended fart from the dragon coming out like an engine blast as a final screw you to the audience. That was a jump the shark, nuke the fridge moment. That scene will go down in film history as one of the most ridiculous, insulting scenes ever. You can be sure of that. So, after the enema, the dragon then willingly hands the fruit over to Doolittle. I guess that's all it takes to be worthy of the fruit. Hey, just pull some armor out of my ass and stand firm in the face of the biggest fart you'll ever experience and we're good. Doolittle then hurries back and uses it to save the queen and expose Lord Bagley for his crimes. And after this whole incident, Doolittle stops being a hermit and goes back to his normal lifestyle of welcoming and treating animals. Which is kinda odd when you think about it. I get this was how his character arc had to be developed, but we've seen nothing to help Doolittle get over the loss of his wife. Unless you count the scene where he confesses to the boy that he feels responsible for her death by letting her go. But then again, that's nothing new. He already begins the film feeling guilty, and ends the film in the same way he began. Implicitly, the film gives the justification that he has some feeling of redemption from finishing what she started and finding the unknown island, but that's a weak justification and just doesn't hold up. Overall, Doolittle was a complete mess of a film. For a film with not much plot, it also didn't have much to offer in terms of character development. Too much time was spent on the numerous animal characters that eventually it all became spread too thin. A silly plot full of worthless dialogue, cringy jokes, bad CGI, and a phone-it-in performance by one of the top leading actors makes this a movie you wish you hadn't watched. It actually had a star-studded cast of some of the most talented actors, but Doolittle shows that even they can't save a crappy script. It's an absolute travesty that this was RDJ's next project after leaving the MCU on a triumphant note with Avengers Endgame. But I guess we all have bad days in the office, and no one's acting career is perfect, so let's cut the man some slack. After all, I'm sure being in one of the most embarrassing movie scenes is punishment enough. I guess the lesson here is that being a kids film doesn't give you the liberty to go off the rails into silly tropes. Even kids these days have higher standards, and you have to respect your audience if you want your film to be received well. So, what do you think? Share your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out our other videos too.